stuff is when you're not thinking about it.
I would think usually the best stuff is when you're not thinking about it.
Okay, we're up to speed. You can begin.
Okay, good. Would you tell us who you are and what you do? Let's start there.
Sure. I'm Ron Johnson. I earn my living as an attorney, but the most important thing I do is create photographic art. I have a website, Violet Crown Photographs, that I display my art, and an important part of that is the blog, where I talk about sort of the philosophy of art, or the philosophy of what I do, if you will. Most photographic websites are very technically oriented. Although I'm as big a gearhead as anybody, I thought it was more important to me to write about sort of the core of why I'm doing, or at least what I'm trying to do when I create an image. And that's all on my website, violetcrownphotographs.com.
I can put that in. I love your blog. Your blog is wonderful. Why do you do it? What motivates you?
I have to. It's a very strange thing. I did photography when I was much younger in a normal wet darkroom, but I was having a growing family and I got tired of having my enlarger balanced on the toilet and closing the bathroom door and shoving a towel under it. It just got to be too difficult. And then one Christmas about 20 years ago, my daughter got me what was then an advanced digital camera. Now it's very primitive, and it suddenly occurred to me that I could do this by computer, and I could do it almost anywhere. But the urge to do it, it's just there. In fact, if I go too long without creating a satisfactory image, an image that's satisfactory to me, I get very cranky. You can ask my wife.
Have you always felt like that? Has that always been an important part, something in your life that's been important to you?
Yes, yes. I was very interested in classical music, for example, at a very early age, 8. I mean, I was probably odd in that regard. And so that's always been an important part. The photography always spoke to me because the look of it, the luminosity, the shades of gray, the tonality. As I got into color, the colors, it just became something, it enabled me to express something that I was too inarticulate otherwise to express. I'm unfortunately not poetic, and I'm not a talented composer, but this was a way that I could articulate nonverbal thoughts and express myself in a way that really sort of excites me, and it's sort of like flying.
Nice, really good. Let's talk about what it means. Let's go a little further into that. What is it? Maybe you can think about what it means to you to have your art creating beauty in your life.
Well, yeah, these are really tough because we're dealing in an area that you pretty much have to be a poet to talk about. So if I'll clumsily bumble through it, I guess all I could do is recommend people to actually take a look at the images. That's where the thoughts are better expressed. But to me, creating beauty, experiencing beauty is like, or is experiencing the divine, if you will. It's going to a place, experiencing a place that's more than just sort of the humdrum going to work and pumping paper or whatever you do for a living. It enables you to realize more who you are or what you are. In my blog, I don't want to sound too eggheady, but I sort of, Plotinus was a Neoplatonic philosopher and mystic, and his creation myth was that at one point people were angels who for whatever reason fell to earth, and when they fell to earth they became embedded in the material and had amnesia. They forgot who they were, and that we are those angels. Now, I'm not saying this is what actually happened, but I think it's a good allegory for how I think many people feel, that you feel maybe that you're not at home here in a way that sometimes you are if you go out, for example, at a starry night and see the Milky Way, or you're at Yosemite and see a cataract roaring off a cliff. There's an experience there that you have that's more than you are otherwise. And I think great art or art properly done has the same impact. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been, for example, to the Sistine Chapel and seen The Last Judgment. We lived in Italy for a number of years, lived in Rome for a number of years, and so we could go look at it. And it's this magical torrent of images and judgment that transcends just painting on a wall. It's relating to something inside of the viewer that I think is more than a biologist would find there, for example. So when I'm making an artistic photograph, or what I'm trying to do is create that feeling in the audience. So when they look at it, they think, I'm home, something like that. So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Let's go back to the idea, Plotinus' idea, and does it feel like that too? Is there something about recapturing those origins? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think it's an allegory. I think you need to be a poet to speak about it in any other way. So I don't want to give the impression that I actually think that's what happened, but that's how I feel about it. I feel oftentimes like I want to go home, that's a way to do it, that when you experience beautiful music, a beautiful photograph, a beautiful sculpture, it's sort of, for me, it's like going home. There's a resonance inside of me, a feeling I get that feels like I'm home. And that's why that allegory is important, because Plotinus said that when you see a beautiful object or when you recognize a beautiful person, you're recognizing the place you came from. Even though you've got amnesia, you still, back in your mind, recognize an aspect of where you came from in that beautiful person. Mother Teresa, for example, your wife, whoever, people you love and care about. Or when you see a beautiful work of art, when you're looking at the Pietà, or when you're listening to great music, there's a feeling, at least for me, of going home, of being in harmony with something I should be in harmony with. In Christian thought, I know Franciscans have a similar sort of idea that the way you get home, the way you get to God who is home, is through beauty. So I think that's another way of saying the same thing. Maybe that's a little more familiar to a Westerner who would be a Christian.
Really nice, thank you. That's great. Tell me about your feelings about it. Did it make you happy, or can you describe your feelings about how you feel when you're doing your work, or how you feel about your work?
When I'm doing it, I'm not thinking at all. I sort of, there's that movie where the little boy says that he sees dead people while I see photographic images. Something like half of the images I've taken were taken within 200 yards of my front door. Normally they're not exceptional things that people would do postcards over. I think, so again, I hate to keep bringing up Plato, but it's sort of like I'm taking a photograph of the idealized form of the thing, of its divine essence. For example, I have a picture I'm looking at the opposite wall right now that has some dark green leaves, and on top of it are 3 leaves of fall colors. When I take a picture of that, that's not what it looks like in real life. One of the great powers of photography, and if you're not careful, hindrances, is its documentary nature. Most photographers are trying to document something. If they're sport photographers, landscape photographers, I'm not trying to document the thing you would see if you were there. I'm trying to document the essence of the thing that's embedded in its materiality. That's why the Plotinus image is kind of helpful for me. And I do that by, when I take the picture, the photons of light go in and they strike on the sensor of the camera, but that's just data. That's all the data that was scientifically there, the photons that came off of the thing I was looking at. What I do by cropping the image, by restricting what you see, by choosing the angle that you're going to see it at, by saturating certain colors if it's a color photograph, or de-emphasizing certain colors, by creating a greater depth of field so that, for example, everything is in focus instead of part of it in focus. I can use the information that was really there, so in that sense it's documentary, but by bringing out certain information that was there that you might not have noticed when you first saw it, I can reveal to you what I think is really there, the reality of the thing. And so when I'm taking the picture, I'm seeing in my mind what I think is really going to be there when I get to my digital darkroom. When I'm actually doing the craft, I'm very focused on the craft, and I'm not thinking about, I'm thinking, I'm not feeling. Until I see it. When I see the image that I initially saw, when I finally see the thing popping out of the background clutter of all the other things that might have been in the picture, then it gets very exciting. And it's like an adventure. And when I finally get the print to come out, and the print is just right, and it takes a lot of arduous labor and lots of printing to get it just right, when it comes out and it's just right, then you sort of feel like you're soaring. It's like you're free. And you can take a lot of pride in it, so forth, that sort of thing. So I guess that's what it feels like for me.
That's wonderful. By the way, James, would you take pictures that we can use to illustrate? That was so great. When you talk about when the print comes out, maybe if you have something that you can use that we can show an example of that.
Well, I bet he has a camera that would take a pretty nice picture.
Yeah.
Do you want like individual pictures, or do you want pictures of the pictures?
What I'm going to do is while you're talking about that experience, I want to show your face, but I also want to show examples of what you're talking about. So if you have something, a picture, and maybe even you can emphasize by pointing to what you're talking about when it pops out, or when the background comes out, or when,
Georgia, get me the shell.
We'll show James an example of that we can use to associate with what you were talking about.
I have an idea. No, the actual shell itself is in the bathroom on the shelf. I have a photograph of a pink Murex. And I have the actual Murex here in the house. It's a little handhold shell. What I'll do is I'll give an example. I'll talk about the shell, what it actually looks like, and then I have the picture next to me. If it doesn't glare too much.
Fabulous.
Okay.
That's terrific. Okay, let's go back to talking. I love what you're saying. Let's talk about, is it important? Do you think it's important what you do to you or to anybody else?
It's really important to me. It's like breathing. I can't imagine not doing it.
Over again, but tell me what it is that's important.
It's
Say creating art or...
Well, yeah, well, it's, yeah. I sort of, to be honest, I feel like I'm discovering the beauty that's there, and that my craft lets me bring it out, is how I think about it. I don't think of it as I am creating the thing of beauty. I think of it as the beauty is embedded in the reality, and I'm teasing it out of reality and showing it to the world. And so it's important to me because it's, for whatever reason, I have to do that. When I find it or I see it, I have to do that. I'd like to think other people enjoy it when they see it, and that they can share the joy that I have when I create it. I have to say, though, it was kind of interesting when I first started doing this, and I, for the first time, started to sort of share it with others, display it to others, and have to admit to myself that I was an artist. I wasn't something else. I really was an artist, and I was telling my friends and family I thought of myself that way. It was sort of like one of those dreams where you're naked and you're walking downtown and no one else seems to know it, but you're acutely aware of how naked you are. It was a lot like that, because when you put an image up, you're putting, in part, yourself up there. You've poured yourself in a way, in a personal way, that you normally don't allow yourself to do in public. When we go to parties, when we socialize with people, unless they're close family members, we usually don't let them see us. But when I'm showing you an image, I'm showing you me, or at least how I've interacted with the divine, if you will. And so it's a deeply personal thing when I share it. And so when I show a work of art to somebody, it's a very antsy period for me, because I really want them to go, wow, I love it. It's like I want them to love my children or something. One of the advantages of being online is it's a little less personal for me. I can put it up there and I don't have to listen when people tell me they don't like it or whatever. But that part of it's a very deeply personal experience. And I think, I don't want to ramble, but I think it might help if I sort of showed you from start to finish quickly how that sort of worked. I bought this pink Murex shell, for example, at a shell store down at the Texas coast. It's a pretty shell, but it's really nothing special. It sits on a bookshelf, and one day I hadn't taken a good picture for about a month. And I was getting I get antsy if I haven't created something beautiful in a certain amount of time. I sort of, if I'm not creating a really gorgeous image at least once a month, I'm very unhappy with myself and I start digging around. And I happened to see this shell on a bathroom bookshelf, actually. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool. It's got some pretty pink colors and it's got some interesting shapes. I wonder if I could do something with it. So I took it out on the deck outside here, right outside these windows, and took an image of it. And if I can show it to you, I hope it comes out on the camera. This is the image that it came out as. You can see that the shell is no longer just a simple shell. You can see I've focused in closely so that it's now almost looks like frothy, foamy, pink cotton candy kind of effect. And you may not recognize it as a shell when you first take a look at it. In fact, that's my purpose. One of the things I do from a theoretical standpoint, and I hope I don't bore the viewers of this, but I think it's important that they understand how the visual process works because it's an important part of why I frame my images the way I do. We're only conscious of a small amount of the data our senses send to our brain at any given moment. For example, when you're asleep, you're unconscious, yet when the alarm clock goes off, you become conscious of it. Your ear doesn't quit functioning even though you were unconscious. Well, when you walk around during the day, you think you're conscious, but you're really only conscious of maybe, let's say, half of what your body is experiencing at any given moment. And William Blake had a saying that really is important to me. I have it on my website. It's, as a man is, so he sees. And what he means by that is the kind of person you are, the kind of things you value, are those things that you'll perceive when you're out in the world. If people are important to you, you'll remember their names, you'll remember their children, that sort of thing. If natural beauty is important to you, you might have a better recollection of flowers that you've seen. But I guarantee, no matter what you think you're perceiving very little of what's actually there. And I think art of any kind can increase your ability to perceive things. If you, through study, through practice, you get used to looking at art or listening to artistic music, you sensitize yourself to the beauty that the artist is presenting, and when you therefore go about your normal life, you'll experience more of the beauty that's there. For years, I would go out at night and walk the dog or whatever, and I would just go out and walk the dog like anybody else. But since I've gotten very interested in art, and since for the last 20, 30 years that I've been working on my photographic project, I stop and smell the roses more. If I go walk the dog, I really notice the Milky Way, or I'll notice the moon. You notice more things that are there. And so when I take a picture, one of the first things I usually want to do is deprive you of knowing what it is right off the bat. Because if I take a picture of, let's say, of Half Dome, the beautiful rock formation out in Yosemite that I'm sure you guys are familiar with, and I take a picture as Half Dome, you'll go, oh, that's a pretty picture of Half Dome, and you'll stop thinking. Whereas if I hide a bit what it is, and I don't abstract it really, but if I hide it a bit, if I make you work at what it is, you'll stop and look at the image and take in the work that I've put into the image a bit more than you would otherwise. So you might have walked by this shell and go, oh, that's a pretty shell, but you wouldn't have thought anything more of it. By taking that same shell and creating an image like this of it, I force you to look at it, because when you first see it, you won't recognize it as a shell. The more you look at the image, you'll come to recognize it's a shell. But in the meantime, you will have seen all the various shades of pink in the corner, the shades of white, gray, light white, that sort of thing in the top part of the image. and you'll have a better understanding of what's there, and hopefully you'll see more of the beauty that was always in the shell that you could have seen if you'd just taken the time to really look at it. And so almost all of my images are that kind of a thing. For example, I just completed a picture of a sand dollar that I'm looking at the wall on the opposite side of me. It's just a sand dollar, but I tried to bring out of it those aspects of being a sand dollar that made it, to me, particularly beautiful. In fact, I think James is going to bring it to me right now so I can show it to you. This is the picture I'm talking about. This is a picture of a sand dollar, and it does look sort of like a sand dollar, I guess, but it wouldn't leap out at you as being a sand dollar. But if you look at it up close, one of the things I also try to do in my photographs is really bring out the detail that's there and try and give it a greater presence than you would have seen if you just looked at it. This particular sand dollar, I was vacationing, my wife and I were vacationing with my daughter's family down at Pensacola, and it was at a beach house, and at the beach house they had this sand dollar laying on a table, and I walked by it one day and thought, well, that's really beautiful, and so I made this image of it. And if unfortunately you won't be able to see it through this video, but if you could, you'd notice the very delicate etch marks of this five-pointed star that's on a sand dollar. You'd see the graininess of the sand that comprised the skeleton of the urchin that was the sand dollar when it was alive. And it would, I hope, be a more intense experience than you would have had had you just seen the sand dollar sitting in the beach house. In fact, you might not have even noticed it. So that's what I try to do when I take a picture. I hope I haven't been too long-winded about it.
So it sounds like we're talking about how experiencing beauty opens you to your existence and almost makes you more vulnerable. Would you say that?
Absolutely. I mean, I totally get the Franciscan idea of obtaining in yourself a state that makes you open to experiencing what's really there that we miss most of the time. If you're a Christian, you would say that's God's presence. However you want to phrase it, that's exactly what you experience. That's exactly the function of beauty. That's why, in fact, I get so frustrated with most contemporary art, for example, because I don't think contemporary art concerns itself with beauty terribly much. And I think art's function in society is critical because it helps render people, as you said, more vulnerable, more open, more sensitive to things that are really important in your life. The look on your granddaughter's face, the tulips in the garden, the trees you walk by. We tend in our modern life to get in our car, go to our office, or go to our work site. We focus on our work. Most of what we see is ugly. To the extent we see anything at all, it's ugly. And that ugliness, I think, clings to us and affects us. It affects who we are. It affects how we think about life. I think a lot of people get despondent, get depressed, treat people in ways that they shouldn't, simply because they haven't been put in the right place. They haven't been put in tune with who they really are and who the people they're looking at really are. You know, people aren't just a bag full of water with amino acids in it. That's how a reductionist like a scientist might describe it, but that's not who they are, really. They're really this creature, this divine being in front of you. And if you don't realize that, you will not act accordingly as you should. So I think art is the human effort at sort of shaking people by the shoulders and saying, wake up, see what's there, feel what you're feeling when you're hearing this music, looking at this image, and remember what it's like. So when you look at your wife or your husband or your child or a place you particularly love, you'll remember the resonance you had from that beautiful work of art, and it will make you more attuned to that. One of the most gratifying things I ever heard from a friend of mine was, you know, your pictures of sort of normal, commonplace things made me look harder when I was home at what was around my house. And that's exactly what I would like people to take from my work, and I think most artists do, is to change who you are as a man is, so he sees. I think that's true, that art can bring you to a place that you can see more. You can perceive life the way you were meant to perceive it, I think.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's great. What would you say then, though, that beauty, therefore, is pretty, necessarily?
No, just the reverse. In fact, pretty is kitsch. If someone were to say I had a pretty photograph, my feelings would be deeply hurt. Pretty is commonplace. The beautiful is not common. The beautiful encompasses far more than just pretty. It encompasses the awful, and I don't mean awful in the sense of terrible, bad, which is the way most modern people use the word awful. I mean awful in the biblical sense. God is awful, meaning inspiring, awe-inspiring. And sometimes awe-inspiring is terrifying. If you've ever been near a roaring river at flood stage, you can feel the power, the beauty of the power of the water, and be terrified of it at the same time. Beauty isn't the thing making you feel the beauty. Beauty is what you're feeling. The thing has certain aesthetic qualities. You know, the study of aesthetics is a branch of philosophy, and you can get into form and composition and color and those sorts of things. And those are important if you're an artist trying to create a thing that will elicit the response in the audience of feeling beauty. But that's the craft of it. If you're a great artist, which I am not, but let's say somebody like Beethoven is, and he writes a symphony, you can dissect it technically and say he's a motivic composer and he's inverted the motive and he does these various things, and you've explained the craft of how he created the Fifth Symphony, for example. But you've done nothing to describe the impact of the bop-bop-bop-bum in the music that it has on you. And it's far from pretty. In passages, it's terrifyingly, awe-inspiringly, Teutonic, if you will. He's got this torrent of powerful, negative, positive, divine emotion pouring out of it that is what's really there and what beauty really is. I think this may sound funny if you haven't read Frankenstein in a while. Mary Shelley, when she wrote Frankenstein, was actually attacking Immanuel Kant, who was a philosopher, who talked about beauty in very formal aesthetics ways, form, composition, so forth. And she was very much concerned that he was removing the purpose, the spirit of the beauty from the thing that was creating the beauty. And so when she wrote Frankenstein, the monster is the Kantian view of life. He is the product of a rational being, Dr. Frankenstein, an Enlightenment intellectual, if you will, who is creating this creature who is the perfect projection of all that is scientific. Yet the monster becomes a monster not because of that, but because the monster lacks domesticity. He wants, what does he want? He wants a bride. He wants a woman. He wants those things that he lacks. He wants the things of natural beauty. So Mary Shelley was saying in the book, it's not enough to simply have a thing, to have the craft, to reduce the craft to aspects. It's like doing an autopsy. You don't know much about the person by doing an autopsy, you know about by knowing the person. And she was trying to make the point that we need more than this reduced view of ourselves. We're not just a thing. And that we need the natural beauty in our lives to make us whole people. And without it, we become monsters. That was the purpose of the book. It was an intellectual argument. And I think that's very true. I probably wandered off your question. I apologize.
So that was outstanding. Some people talk to us about finding beauty in brokenness. Does that mean anything to you?
Yes, that's kind of romantic era. The romantic